Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle. I have accidentally collected one of each of the main flavors of Space Marines, all of the first founding legions. I have tasted the rainbow, and it tasted pretty good. I didn't expect to have all of the Space Marines, but it's really fun. Like, they're all lined up in front of me, and I have them, and I've experienced them all, and that was the most important part. I am a Black Templar player at heart, and I always will be. I have something like 14,000 points of Black Templar with a lot more on the way. But it was fun to take a break and experience all that Space Marines have to offer. Space Marines are something special. It's the most 40k thing about 40k. Knights in space with Iron Man power armor, and each different color gave me a little something. Starting with the Dark Angels. The Dark Angels, I think the Dark Angels are incredibly cool because they're basically the Black Templar, but green. Now, Black Templar are cooler because black is cooler than green, but I really enjoyed painting this Dark Angel. I painted it with mostly speed paint, which I don't use speed paint enough. I use a ton of speed paint, but I don't use it enough on Space Marines because contrast paint from Games Workshop is very good, but it doesn't work particularly well on Space Marines. It dries really, really fast, so it's hard to get it all over the Space Marine, especially if you're trying to like avoid getting it in some spots. And so Army Painter speed paint is a little bit easier because it has a longer drying time, and it works really well on this Dark Angel. I've always had like a thought in my head of maybe a Space Marine army doesn't necessarily only need to be one chapter. Like, it doesn't have to be one color. Because, you know, in all the books and stuff, when there's a giant campaign or a giant battle, usually many different chapters of Space Marines are all together. So there probably could be something to have an army that is not strictly one chapter of Space Marines. Now, it's kind of cooler and more roleplay to have one chapter of Space Marines and you're the High Marshal, you're the chapter master of this force of Space Marines, but there is something. Like, I got a little something out of each of these Space Marines, and I really like the Dark Angel. I made them all beat up. I gave them all of these lovely candles, which are red, and immediately after I painted these candles red, I went to my the next few Black Templar models I painted, I gave them red candles because it looks so good on this Space Marine. And I actually painted those and they didn't look as good because I rewatched this video and I used speed paint on the candles, and I think it added a little something. So I actually repainted the red candles that I did because they didn't look exactly like these red candles, and now they do look exactly like these red candles. But I really, really like the Dark Angels. But speaking of things I really like, the white scars. White, like painting your models white, especially white and red, like Tau players will agree with me, it looks really good. You can't get much brighter than white. And I really like the white scars. Some people thought that I did white chipping all over the miniature, and I think it looks really good. I went a little hard on the shield, but I really like it. Some people said it didn't look like scratches, but I didn't necessarily mean it to look like scratches. I wanted it to look like his armor is pitted and worn, but has been repainted without like all of those little chips and dings filled in. I also think it's a really good idea to have the white chipping instead of like gray chipping or gunmetal chipping, because having all of those little scratches all over the miniature would make him look darker. And I didn't want to do anything to the model that would make it dark. It's a white scar. It should be a nice, bright, crispy Space Marine. That was really fun to say. But I really like how the white scars turned out. A White Scars army would be cool. I would love to collect a White Scars army because it would just be bikes, just bikes on top of bikes on top of bikes on top of bikes, which is bad right now in the game. Like, in the Space Marine Codex, there's 3 mounted units. There's the Primaris ATV, there's the Outrider Squad, and then there's Chaplain on bike. So basically you can't make a mounted army because you can only take 3 of each unit. And so you can't get to 2,000 points like that. You'd almost have to play Space Wolves, which are next. You'd almost have to play Space Wolves to have enough mounted units to actually fill out a full 2,000 point force of only mounted units, but it would be really cool. And I guess you can supplement it with some of the flyers and some of the other fast moving units, but a Space Marine on a bike is what a White Scar is meant to be. Next up is the Space Wolves, and I'm really glad I painted this Space Wolf because his armor is perfect. And I have painted a bunch of Space Wolves. I have a Space Wolves kill team. I have like a little kit bash squad of Space Wolves, and both of them look wrong in a certain way. I think my kill team is a little bit too gray. I think my little one-off model is a little bit too color saturated. Like, this guy's armor is the perfect amount of like baby blue and nice dark blue recesses. Like, this Space Wolf is perfect. And I kind of want to paint more Space Wolves. There is a expansion to Space Hulk, the board game, where you can bring in some Space Wolf Terminators, and I kind of want to add those to my collection, and so I'm gonna be using this recipe on those Space Wolf Terminators. If I had to start over with Space Marines, I think I would do the Space Wolves because they're so different to my Black Templar. I have sunk 1 million skulls, I glued on 1 million purity seals, I have painted 1 million power swords, but the Space Wolves are different. They have frost weapons. They don't really, they have pelts and furs instead of purity seals and banners. They're not very gothic. I really like the Space Wolves. And if I had to start over, if you just said collect a new Space Marine army, it would be like, my current Space Marine army took so much work, and I kind of experienced it all. Primaris gave me a new lease on my Space Marine life because I got to experience new things, where if I just had to collect the old Squatty Marines forever and ever, I probably would burn out, but Primaris gave me another lease on life. I feel like the Space Wolves are the only other way I could have another lease on Space Marine, another way that I could open my heart to having even more Space Marines. I really like the Space Wolves, but their colors, I like Black Templar. I don't necessarily love baby blue. I like how it looks. I think it is really fun, but could I paint thousands and thousands of models with this baby blue armor? I'm not sure, but I am sure that I would adore an Imperial Fists army. That I've stared at this model for so long. The Imperial Fists are so good. Oh, I love yellow. It just looks so good. And with the base, I'm gonna make a bunch of terrain pieces, doing this exact same style of basing. I really like the Imperial Fist. It's the simplest thing. It's a bog standard Space Marine with yellow armor, but man, is that armor yellow. I recently painted up some other Space Marines in yellow, painted this yellow Space Marine. There's something about yellow that is just so good and so silly. What military force would paint their armor bright, crispy yellow? But I love it. I love it so much. It would look so good, a yellow Space Marine force spread out in front of me. The only thing I don't like about the Black Templar, I love every individual model, and I love the new Primaris Black Templar models that are coming out, but all masked up kind of just looks like nothing. It's just black. You have to pick each one up and really look at it before you really get a good sense of it. The Imperial Fist, a sea of yellow would look so good. Oh, it would look so good. One chapter that I kind of struggled with was the Blood Angels, and I was all set to really love the Blood Angels. I've actually collected an army of 2nd edition Blood Angels Space Marines, retro 2nd edition metal models. And I was really hoping that when I painted this guy up, I would just fall in love with it. It's okay. Red is a tricky color to work with because it's right in the middle. But if color is a spectrum and you got black on one side and white on the other, red is right smack in the middle. If the lighting is really good, it's red, but gets a little bit pink. And if you're in bad lighting, which is most of the world, it looks really dull. It's really hard to get red just right. I like how this guy turned out, and actually, his base is one of my favorite bases of all time. I need to paint up some more stuff just so I can do this exact basing scheme. It's super simple, barely an inconvenience, but a little bit of crackle medium, a little bit of texture paste, a couple of tufts that perfectly match the colors I used on the base. This base looks real. I've really enjoyed giving each one of these Space Marines a different base, and this one is probably the lamest, but it's my favorite. I really like how it turned out, and then the pigment powder that I used on his legs matches the base really nicely. I have a bunch of Fallout Wasteland Warfare minis, which is based on the Fallout universe, the video games. Definitely gonna be stealing this basing idea for those minis. It looks Fallout New Vegas. I have trekked 1 million miles in Fallout New Vegas, standing on ground that looks exactly like this. But speaking of standing your ground, the Iron Hands, the Siege Masters. Well, I guess I shouldn't say Siege Masters in front of the Imperial Fists, but the other Siege Masters, these guys are really cool. A friend of mine collects the Iron Hands, and so I really was excited to give the Iron Hands a try to experience it for myself. And it's a little tricky. I think I was in a little bit of a Black Templar funk at the time. So I'm another suit of black power armor. How do I make this unique? just weathering the absolute heck out of it worked really, really well. He's almost not black, like most of his armor has most of the black paint on his armor has been worn away. And I really like how that looks. I also really like the Iron Hands for how easy it was to kind of heavily convert this guy. A lot of these Space Marines, some of them I was able to come up with a really fun way to take the classic Intercessor kit and transform it just a little bit to make it feel like they're not all the exact same Marine painted different colors. They're each a very separate chapter of space monks that have their own eccentricities to them. And this guy worked out so good just by nipping a little bit of his armor into that cog shape. It was really easy, it came together really quickly. I stole a shoulder pad from the old Rhino box. It all worked really well. And I gave him a literal chrome dome. And I think the chrome dome works really, really well. I really like how the Iron Hands turned out. Could I collect an army of Iron Hands? Probably not, because my friend already does, so I can just look at his army whenever I want, but I do like the Iron Hands quite a bit. Next up is the Ultramarines. Oh, the Ultramarines. I mean, what is there to say about the Ultramarines? They're very blue. That's something nice about them. They're fine. Gilliman is really cool. Actually, he is really cool in the books, especially in modern 40K. I feel like he didn't really come into his own until Warhammer 40,000, because in 30K, he's kind of just the good son. He's really good at logistics. He's important to make a war actually work, but he's not a super ultra amazing badass. And I feel like his chapter is a little bit made up of not super amazing badasses. It was really cool that they fought the Tyranid Hive Fleet Behemoth, which is the Tyranid Hive Fleet that I collect, but they're just okay. I like how my little guy turned out. Not the first Ultramarine I've ever painted, but probably the last Ultramarine I'll ever paint. But speaking of things that are cooler than the Ultramarines, the Salamanders. And before any of you say it, yes, I know that the decal is facing the wrong direction. It is important, the facing of the dragon. The dragon should be facing towards the front. It should be facing whatever the Salamander is facing. My question is, why is this decal on the sheet if it's the wrong direction? I guess if you have a dragon on both shoulders, then you pick a lefty to go on the left shoulder and a righty to go on the right shoulder, but I didn't know that before I put the decal on. But when everyone called me out on it, it did lead me down a cool lower rabbit hole where I got really invested in the specific iconography of the Salamanders. And what I really like about this guy is I came up with the sandpaper trick to make his loincloths and little pieces of salamander skin. And, these guys live essentially on Mustafar, the Star Wars planet that Darth Vader has a summer home on. And I really like how he turned out. The lava, there's something not quite right about it. It might just be how matte it is. And maybe I should spray a little bit of gloss varnish on there and see if that pumps up the color saturation a little bit, because finish is actually really important in painting. Usually metallic paints are very glossy, and I think that's why the Iron Hand looks really glossy. None of these guys are varnished. I kind of go back and forth on varnishing my models. I try to varnish, but it's hard to find the perfect varnish because you don't want something too matte that the colors look a little bit dull, but you don't want something too glossy that it's just shiny and your models don't look right. But then there's a lot of wiggle room in the middle. I have a Vallejo Mecha Varnish Satin, which I really like, but it's a hint too glossy in my opinion. I've never found anything that is absolutely perfect. But the Salamanders are absolutely perfect. I like the Salamanders a lot. Their detachment is really fun in game, and it gives some big benefits to Melta and flamethrower weapons. The Salamanders, unfortunately, their 30K books aren't very good, but I really like them in the world of Warhammer 40,000 because they're the good guys. They actually have feelings. They want to help humans, they want to be good guys. And that is so refreshing in the world of Warhammer, where usually you've got a couple heroes we saved the day, but the entire Hive City died. But don't worry about that. We saved the day, and then credits roll. The Salamanders would be devastated if they lost a Hive City, if they didn't fight hard enough to save every single person. And that's really, really cool. And speaking of really, really cool, have you heard about our Patreon? Ever wanted to fight your battles in the labyrinthine hallways of a starship, moving your models in tight formation through a maze of corridors, bulkheads, and junctions where retreat is impossible and danger is around every corner? Well, the Eons of Battle Starship Interior is here to make that dream a reality. For the month of July, subscribers to our Patreon will receive the Starship Interior, a set of claustrophobic, dynamic, and modular hallways that are scaled to perfectly suit wargaming miniatures and give you a new way to play. The Raven Guard. the last loyalist chapter that I have here. I like the Raven Guard a lot. I feel like I have a special connection with the Raven Guard because I use their detachment, the Vanguard Spearhead detachment, all the time. Like I've played 40 games with my Space Marines, and I feel like at least half of them were with Vanguard detachment. It's really fun. It gives you a benefit of if you're standing more than 12 inches away from your opponents, then you get -1 to hit and cover, which is really powerful. And it kind of makes the Space Marines feel a little bit more like the Space Marines because, you know, each of these guys is a one-man army in the lore. But on the tabletop, you roll a 5, they die. Like it's super frustrating, but the Raven Guard detachment is a really fun one to play in because it makes your Space Marines quite a bit tankier. And it's also extra beneficial for units like Centurion Warsuits because they want to stand back and shoot. And standing back, like a Centurion Warsuit with a 2-up save and like 5 wounds, getting stealth and cover is really fun. It's like my favorite unit in all of 40k, and I get to play with a lot because I force it to happen, but they're not very good in game. And so the Raven Guards helped me to make my Centurion suits actually good. But in terms of the miniature, essentially it's another black power armored Space Marine, but there's something about them. Like I think they offer a fun amount of kit bashing and converting. I gave this guy a little poncho or like a little ghillie suit over his shoulder, and I assume like he can throw it over himself and then poke his little gun out the front, and then just it'll be really fun. Like I would love to do like a whole squad of Raven Guard Space Marines with different levels of ghillie suits on. Like this guy's, he's classy with it draped over his shoulder, and then another guy could maybe have it like Clint Eastwood poncho style, and then another guy is just 100% in a poncho with just 2 holes or 3 holes cut out, 2 for the eyes and 1 for the bolster sticking out the front. I think that would be really, really fun. I like the Raven Guard a lot. I like their play style. I'm a Black Templar player, but I feel like my play style is a little bit more Raven Guard-y. I think there's a great, like with Black Templar, you want to charge everything all the time, always. But I think a 50-50 split of these close combat units are going to charge in and fight, but the rest of the army, which is going to kind of stand back and shoot, I think that is actually a really, really good play style for the Space Marines. And also, another thing I love about this Raven Guard is he painted up in like an hour and a half. And if I had to paint more of them, they would probably get quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. I really, really enjoyed painting this guy. And I enjoyed painting all of these guys. And I've got like a little collection. This is all of them. This is all of the first founding Space Marine chapters, the loyalist Space Marine chapters. And so where do I go from here? I think I get into some of the weird stuff. The second founding, like my Black Templars, are a successor of the coolest guys, the yellow, the Imperial Fists. There's a lot, like after this, these guys are normal. After this, things get weird. We get into like Kakaradons, the Black Dragons, the Lamenters, the Crimson Fists. Like after this, Space Marines get weird and wacky, and I am excited for it. So let me know in the comments below what Space Marine chapters I should work on next, because maybe I will collect them all.